Hello, welcome to the show. Thank you for making time in your day and your very busy schedule to have this conversation.
Thanks
I
for
would
having me.
say, yeah, it's my pleasure. I would say you're many things: a philosopher, entrepreneur, husband, father, but most importantly, my older brother. And I know you very well, pretty much since the moment you were born. um,
Since the moment you were born.
pretty much. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you
Yeah,
do?
well, yeah, I think you said a bit of what I do. Uh, I currently, so I'm Nicaraguan. I was born and raised in Nicaragua.
Hmm.
Um, I met my wife in the second grade. She was a missionary kid. As you guys may know, I'm a pastor's kid, just like you. And then we somehow, one way or another, we ended up in the same college. We went to Calvin University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then we
Hmm.
got married, and then uh, traveled the world, and now we have three girls. Um, I love the outdoors. I love working my hands, and I love right now anything that has to do with relationships, wholeness, story. That's all I think about
Hmm.
for the past years, 2, 3 years.
Yeah, and we're gonna go into a bit of that. Um, yeah, I know you've been in quite a journey these past few years. A few
Yeah.
years ago, you were managing a managing member at a company, and now you're no longer a manager at this company that you were, but now you're the owner of your own. But a lot of things happen in between. A lot of things. Could you guide me through, or guide the whole audience through the whole story, starting with your education? Where'd you go to college?
Oh yeah, sure. So I went to Calvin University, and I got a business major with two concentrations in management and marketing, and a minor in philosophy. Yeah, I was part of the international crowd at Calvin. It was a lot of fun. A great place. Amazing place to go. Uh, I love Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's one of my favorite places on earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should visit sometime. Wink, wink.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought I wanted to be in the corporate world, um,
Mhm.
but then I realized, you know, I got an internship or a mentorship in New Zealand
Mhm. Yeah.
with a highly sustainable business there. It was in educational tourism, and it was a lot of hands-on work. And man, I fell in love with hands-on work and farming. And then uh, my wife and I together, we managed an organic flower farm in Maui for about 3 years, and then we we were partners at a big uh, big cattle operation for a few years. So it has been an interesting journey because we weren't looking for positions.
Hmm.
I think we were never looking for.
It just sort of happened.
Yeah, it just sort of happened. We weren't looking for to build a resume. Uh, the way we would talk to each other is, "Oh, where does God want us next?" And we would just go there. And
Mm.
we would work our butts off, and somehow doors opened uh, until doors stopped opening, and I think that's what uh, started happening. I think about 2 or 3 years or so. It's been a
Mhm.
very interesting journey.
Yeah. So what happened after that? So you were at this company, at this dairy farm. You were trying to buy it. I understand you were trying to purchase a business, and that didn't go through. What happened after that? What'd you do?
Oh yeah, so we had we had quite a bit of a nest egg saved up, and we were gonna buy a business, and it was gonna be the first week of December of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
2018, I believe. And we had the papers drawn up, everything was ready to go, and we had let our partners know 6 months prior that we had been saving up to buy our own business. And we slowly, we transitioned, you know, I think pretty well out of the position, and we trained anybody that needed to be trained. And unfortunately, a week before signing the papers,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the other people uh, in the deal already backed out. And yeah, it was tough because by then, no matter how well you want to try to do things as you're transitioning out of a company, we already had gone through the mourning phase. We already had gone through the, you know, tough conversations with the
Mm-hmm.
company we were with. It was almost kind of having a breakup, even though it was good. We were moving towards something we wanted to do, and we always wanted to do. But yeah, so we said, okay, well, it's December. Um, let's see. Let's start applying for jobs and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did. So we did.
Yeah.
Literally, it was, pretty much a full time job for about 5 months. I was running every day at 5 a.m. I would.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I was
Yeah.
running with you.
So yeah, it was one day. It was snowing. Yeah, we went on a run. It was
Yeah.
snowing, 5 a.m., super dark.
It was a blizzard, literally. It was a blizzard. I thought I was gonna die. I actually lost my contacts in that because the snow got into my eyes and somehow my contacts just fell out. So by the time we got to the house, I was blind. I was like, oh my gosh, I could literally be hit by a giant snowball and die in this place. It was so cold too.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
which is strange because it doesn't really snow too much here in Oregon, in
Yeah.
Eugene, Oregon. We get a lot of rain, but it doesn't really snow. But yeah, so that was my day. Consisted of running 5 a.m. Got home, showered, uh, and then I took applying for a job as a full time job.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought, yeah, sooner or later, someone's gonna snatch me up. And oh man, we applied hundreds of places.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I think, I don't know, for one reason or another, and now looking back, 20 hindsight 2020, but looking, for one reason or another, no one called back. And I remember even knocking on doors. I would go to random companies with my resume printed, knock on their company and give my resume and say, hey, here, look, this is who I am. As you can see, I applied online, but I wanted you to see me. Like, I went all out for months and months and months. But for some reason, you know, all that knocking yielded no results. And I think that was a that was a very difficult time, tough pill for me to swallow. I think maybe a lot of people right now. This happened before the pandemic, 2018, early 2019. I'm sure some people out there um, could relate to the anguish of having a family, having kids, and you doing everything you can, but nothing is working. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was a very tough time. Yes.
Yeah, so pretty much you for that whole time, that was also a rough time for me too, because for the whole family, for our whole family, that was a it all came like at the same time, because that same year, April 2018, for people that don't know, riots started happening in Nicaragua, our home country, and I was in junior year of high school when all of this came to happen. Pretty much, long story short, I couldn't come back home. I was visiting my brother Gerson, and I couldn't come back because stuff had happened. My life had even been threatened back home. And I remember one time I came back home. This house, I remember the story. Came back home and you were on the phone. I didn't know who you were talking to. And you are a tough, tough man. I can assure everyone, every listener. And that day you were teary eyed, and I was shocked, cause and you didn't even say anything. First words that came out of your mouth were Nain, mom wants to talk to you. I'm like, oh my word, I don't know what's going on. This is it's not looking good already. Then pick up the phone. It's my mom. I hear someone on the back sort of crying, and then I realize it's my dad. And uh, that was a very tough moment because first sentence my mom said is, Nain, you can't come back home. You got to stay there in the U.S. And that was not part of the plan because I was very involved back then in high school, and I think I was gonna be probably the varsity uh, captain for the soccer team. I was gonna be president for the school, and I was very involved. I had a lot of involvement in worship leading, and that was a very, very immediately I'm thinking all those things. But what was rough was the next sentence, which said pretty much I asked my mom, why? What's going on? She says, well, um, your cousin Enrique was just killed this morning. He was shot and killed by the police. And that didn't quite hit me that day. Because I was like, it can't be, trying to rationalize everything. Um, and it definitely hit a few days after. And that year was not normal for anyone, especially for our family. Our family was hit hard. It hit home. Um, so that was a very tough time for us. But that's a little part of our story together. And so that's how I ended up pretty much running with you. Was because I was living with Gerson while I finished my high school education. I studied in a small private school in Eugene, Oregon. Pretty much that was the only place that we could really that I could really be in school because people were already in school already, and it was a whole process to get our visa and everything for me to get ready. Initially, they didn't even want to do it. Then we were like, yeah, he can't come back, and
Yeah. Well, maybe be worth it explaining what the government was doing. We're not politically involved. You weren't politically involved. I wasn't. Not
No.
Our cousin who got shot and killed wasn't involved in anything. It's just that the people that were protesting against the government were college aged,
Yeah.
and the government began a massive lockdown on anyone that was young, late teens, mid early 20s.
Yep.
And if you filled that profile, if you fit that profile back then, you were at risk of being taken and tortured and or killed. Um, it doesn't make rational sense, but that's how So
Yeah.
you are obviously in high school. Anybody high school, college age was at risk, and we all had to make tough decisions. So that was the end of 2018, and
Yeah.
that was a lot of things happened that year, 2018, 2019.
Yeah, and then 2019, then it's all the COVID era. And so when I came here to the States in 2019, I was already in 2020, everyone was going crazy with the lockdowns, with COVID and everything. They're doing online school for the first time ever. And I'm chilling pretty much because I had already done online school before because of all the lockdowns in Nicaragua, because of all the political strife going on. Anyway, that's beside the point. But yeah, so pretty much you're unemployed in 2019. Also 2020, you're looking for jobs, no doors open. So you decide to do what?
Well, so during that whole time, I didn't have any. I didn't have a job, but I was always doing something. So
Yeah.
I was, I went from farming hemp. So a friend needed help in their hemp operation. So I would drive and farm with them. I was doing construction. I was doing uh, random jobs here and there, handyman jobs, anything that would show up. And I was trading a lot, and you know, actually, you could pay the mortgage a few times from the proceeds of trading. But it's not the best to trade when you're under really high stress. Eventually, the high stress gets to you, and my trading went downhill as the stress was mounting up. Because when what I would consider that process beginning of 2018 on was like a forest fire in my life, where a lot of things that were dead, instead of me dealing with life and processing life and getting rid of things that I didn't need. I was accumulating all this dead wood, and it takes one spark and everything goes up in flames. And I think that's what was going on, in my life. Well, my life was going up in flames, and it's one of those. I got to a point where I'm like, man, I don't know if there's gonna be anything left. Yeah, which ideally you get rid of the dead wood in your life as you go, and you do controlled burns, and maybe this part of my life needs to be rejuvenated. But if you don't do that, your life eventually, the whole life catches on fire. And that's what was happening. That's what was happening on me. A lot of my sense of worth was very tied to accomplishments and tied to position and tied to status. If and once you take all that away, then you're really faced with what you really have as your identity. You're really faced with what you really have as your foundation for your self-esteem and all that. So I had a conversation with Jackie on 2020. So yeah, that was all 28. So it was 2019, 2018, 2019, and 2020. By 2020, I was doing mostly construction work, and yeah, construction work and trading. But I had a conversation with Jackie, and I said, Jackie, I feel like I need someone to help me. I need someone to come alongside of me and help me, because I remember telling her, I feel like I'm like a truck that's stuck in the snow. I'm going full speed. My tires are spinning really fast. The engine is heating up. Smoke is coming out, but I'm getting nowhere. And I said, I feel like I need somebody to come alongside and help me just push me a little bit just so I can get traction again. And it was a tough, it was a tough time, tough conversation to have because, I had been, by that point, I had been so beaten down in, I've been so beaten down and it was a very tough time. So, yeah, I have this conversation with Jackie and Jackie contacted William Paul Young.
Which is the author of The Shack. Yeah. Not easy to contact.
uh, she messages him on Facebook and he messages her right back.
What?
And they start talking and then she says, hey, my husband is going through a tough time. His shack is being torn down. And how do we, and he respects and admires you and perhaps you can, give him some pointers. And I get I open an email and I get a message from William Paul Young.
That's crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And he said, he says, I can't really be your mentor. I don't like, or pretty much I'm nobody's mentor, but I could be your friend. He said, but if you need help, he said, if you need help, here is my friend. His name is, and he said his name is Byron Keller, and contact him and talk to him. He's a therapist. And I said, sure, let's do it. So late 2020, I began seeing a story-informed trauma therapist every single Monday. And it's been a year since.
Yeah. It's the anniversary. How we're celebrating.
So, yeah, and I've kind of been in this journey too because you've sort of brought me along. I remember December you called me. Yeah, this is Christmas season. And then you tell me what's going on um, and how you started sort of this journey. And that was a turning point for me as well. Because I was like, wow, I might need some help. I might need some therapy as well. And and that was I started being really introspective back then because I knew that I wasn't like anyone else as well. I wasn't like any of my peers, and that I didn't really have any peers in the first place. People that I had called friends, we're sort of friends. We knew each other. It's like in high school, everyone knew me. Even like everyone knew me. I knew everyone, but no one really knew me. They knew who I was and they saw me around and I said hi to them. They said hi to me. But it's not like a true peer relationship where you can rely on each other and you're truly friends.
Yeah, a healthy, reciprocal relationship, a friendship.
Yeah.
And I realized back then I didn't have that. And yeah, I started to learn a lot. You sent me videos and I started to ask more questions about who I am. And you sent me some book titles, and I start reading. One of these is No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
And quite a book, honestly. It's I think it's one of the few books that have actual real impact, long-term impact. Because many of the book I for people that don't know, I try to read a book a week, and I'd say I'm pretty successful at it. And I've read a lot of books, especially in the last 2 years. But this book, it's not the kind of book that you certainly can read a book and just throw everything away, right? Nothing stays. But this book has so much, at least in my life, a lot of truth and a lot of like so much that I could relate to, that I couldn't just throw it away. So yeah, I remember one of the parts in the book, very important part that has helped me a ton, is that there are lessons in life that pretty much there's positive and negative reinforcement, and when you're a child, you think everything is about you. You are, the author says, you're egocentric, and whatever your parents do, it's all about you. That's why many times kids, even in movies, they show this. When parents are divorcing, the children immediately ask one of the parents, "Was it because of me?"
Yeah.
And because children really truly think it's about them. They caused it. They must have done something, because
Yeah.
usually that's how they get rewards and that's how they get punishment. You do something, you make an action, they tell you no, you break it, there's a punishment. And so it's a simple mindset that is literally applied to everything. So everything is about the child. This doesn't get developed until later. And so yeah, you talked a lot about, and I think we share a lot of things because we have the same parents. And um, yeah, uh,
In
Yeah,
our
we grew.
case,
Yeah, we
yeah.
grew up in the same neighborhood.
hmm
You know, I
Yeah, we never
remember.
moved.
I remember one day we had our teachers, two of my teachers, uh, come and have dinner at a house, and after dinner was over, they were getting in their car, and there was literally a gang coming to mug them in their car. You know, uh, and I was in high school, and I wanted to impress my teachers, and I want them to have a good time, and I had to tell them get in the car and run. They literally had to jump in their cars,
Yeah.
and take off in their car.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a gang of like 8 guys with knives coming at them, and so we grew up in a very rough situation. We grew up in the third world, and within the third world, we grew up in a neighborhood where
Yeah, pretty
even
bad.
even the cops wouldn't go in.
Yeah.
So
I would say top 3 in the country, of the how bad it can get. Top 3.
yeah, and children have blonde hair, not because they're blonde naturally, but because of malnutrition. And
Yep. And drugs.
There's a lot of drugs. There's a lot of alcohol. There's a lot of violence. Uh, you know, we grew up in a post Civil War society. Our Nicaraguan Civil War ended in 1990, so all the adults have been
Experience that.
experienced that. And instead of being able to articulate and talk about it and heal, they bottle it all up, and they either go to alcoholism or anger or just depression, or some people find Christ. And I think that was the story of our parents. Within that horrible history of our country. You know, my parents, they found Christ, and I think
Which is a true miracle, honestly.
And you look back.
yeah.
I still don't know. I to this day, I still don't understand how in the world, yeah, especially my dad, how in the world he became Christian. Because, man, the way he grew up was way worse than we ever had it by far. And
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, that's true miracle. I'm still, I'll always be shocked by that, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's, for me, a side note, because we grew up
Mhm.
very different than everyone around us. I had always heard of certain people going to therapy, certain people going to counseling,
Yeah.
and it was always, from my perspective, the spoiled kids. You know,
We would make fun of them.
yeah. I'm like,
I would
what?
make fun of them before. Like, you're like, what? You're doing that? No.
Yeah, it's like we have gone through nothing. You know, but actually, when was it? Earlier in 2020, I had an injury in my shoulder. I think that was eye opening for me, because I was shooting my bow very consistently, and I developed a pain in my shoulder, and it got so bad that I couldn't sleep sometimes, and I couldn't pull my bow back.
Sheesh.
So, and it was like 2 months of me not being able to lift my shoulder up. So it came from shooting my bow, but I was still working construction, and I remember we were
Not a great combination.
we were framing a house, and I was trying to lift my shoulder, but I couldn't lift my shoulder to put the beams up.
Slock.
So I just had to lift it up and put it here, and kind of, it was painful. It was tough. So eventually, I said, Jackie, I think I need to get my shoulder looked at, and I go to this physical therapist. So I'm like, oh, physical therapy. Oh, it's just, it's just gonna be a waste of time. And this guy, which he's now one of my friends now, and he sends me my physical therapist back then. He sends me home with these little rubber bands and all these little exercises. I feel nothing. I'm like, what is
You
this?
probably thought this is ridiculous.
This is ridiculous, but I told him I was gonna do the exercises, so I just go home and do the exercises. I feel nothing. It seems ridiculous. It seems funky, but man, over time, because we had measured my range of motion, pain, and all that, and then just over time, I start seeing improvement, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is working.
Yeah.
All these random little exercises, all these random little things, and by the time of 3 months, I had full range of motion, and I was stronger than before.
Wow.
And I
That's
was like,
incredible.
whoa. I was like, so that I think God was preparing me for.
Were you shooting your bow?
Were you shooting your bow while you were doing that physical therapy, or you stopped for that?
I took a break.
Okay.
But then I started again.
Hmm.
And now I shoot a heavier bow with more poundage, and I just feel stronger in general, in my shoulders at least. Yeah, but I feel that was, God preparing me for the idea of going to, a therapist, and going through story informed trauma therapy, which is different. I think a lot of people make money off of just listening to people talk about their pain.
Yeah.
But story informed trauma therapy, it's
those exercises.
It's a journey. So there's definitely a beginning and an end to the journey. And my therapist said, My goal is to take you from here to New York. I'm gonna guide you there. You're gonna do all the driving. I'll be your guide. But we're gonna get to New York. It's not like you're gonna sit here every week indefinitely and tell me everything that shows up in life. No, no, no. He says you're gonna gain tools. You're gonna gain health, um, so that you graduate and then you move on with life. And I think one of those tools was uh, no more Mr. Nice Guy, which I think was resonated with all of us, four
Yeah.
brothers. It was, you
Mhm.
know, still still is a very impactful book. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember you mentioned this same thing during this whole year. Reading that book, usually I take a week to read a book. That book took me 5 months. I think 4 or 5 months to read. And it wasn't because I couldn't read it in one sitting. It was just I wanted to really digest what I was reading.
Yeah.
And just like you said with those rubber band exercises, there are exercises in the book that the author makes you do. And those exercises are incredibly helpful. I remember in that one, there's one exercise that said, which I talked a little bit about it before, list lessons that you have learned from your parents and from your your home and how you grew up. And this is when I realized that my this is when I realized that a lot of the lessons I learned were about my identity in terms of money, just money. It was all about money, about success, same thing, status, money. Um, Hence, why I was all the positions I was in high school and even in college, really. And it's not like what I tell people is when I talk about this, it's not like you really choose your story because you don't know that you're repeating someone else's story or that you're literally living out the lessons that you have learned before when you were a child. But you're doing this unconsciously. You're just living life. You're going through it. For example, one of the lessons that I learned was every time that I did something wrong and I would get punished from my parents, there wasn't really a corner. A lot of parents now they do is like they send their children to the corner, like cry there or whatever. But for me, in my case, in our house, it was, oh, you did something wrong, then go take a nap. That's the punishment. And it was a punishment. A lot of people, when I tell that, it's like, oh my gosh, really? That's a punishment? That's amazing. That's great. But when you're a child, the way I was, super energetic, and they would say ADHD, ADD type, can't stay still. The number one thing, the worst thing you can say to them, to that child is be still, go take a nap, go sleep. When you literally can't, you have so much energy that you want to do everything. You want to climb trees, you want to throw rocks, you want to play with sticks. And so that was a real punishment to me. So now I'm reading this book and I'm realizing, oh my word, this is a lesson I learned. So every time I was frustrated, I didn't know I was frustrated because I wasn't in touch with my emotions. I didn't know what was going on. But all of a sudden, I'd be like, wow, I'm really tired today. And maybe it's because I got an exam back and I got a B plus instead of an A. And, or I traded bad. I also do trading, investing, and maybe I traded bad that morning and I'm really feeling tired later, just a couple hours later. I'm like, wow, what's going on? I'm just going to take a nap. And that become a habit for me, pretty much. It wasn't every day, but very often. very often, maybe every 2-3 days, because there was it was correlation between napping and my self-worth. If my self-worth was bad, if I thought I wasn't worth being awake and doing something, then I would just cope by sleeping. And that's one of the lessons I learned. Another big lesson I learned was, so people understand more the way we grew up. Our parents were great in many ways, but they also have their faults, like any person, any people. And so my dad, the way he grew up was not the best household at all. His father was very abusive in every shape, way, or form. His family was abusive in verbally, physically, sexually, all the ways you can imagine. Terrible, terrible way to grow up. And his dad, so my grandfather, it was all about money for him, and success was about money. And when he married my grandmother, he was very wealthy by the standards, and he was very, very well known. His status was high. So one of the reasons why my grandmother married my grandfather was because of the status and success and the money. When that happened, um, somewhere or another, the man lost everything. He lost every single penny, became an alcoholic. And so my father, growing up with this ideal of success and status, and a lot of our family, when you look back, it's about the family name. We have to bring pride to our family name. The Mirandas, we got to show everyone else that the Mirandas are in town, that they're the best or whatever, that they're excellent or whatever we want everyone else to know us by. So my dad grew up with this view of the world about success equals money, because if you're successful, you're by default rich. You have a lot of money, and you also have status. So the best way to be classified as successful and to be given good status is to become rich, especially in a place like Nicaragua, especially in a place that we grew up, where not many people are rich. And so if you're rich, automatically you have high status and you're successful. So there is a huge relationship between money and success. If you have money, you're successful. So pretty much the lessons that my father learned were being taught to me. And so one of the lessons that I can talk about is, I remember he would, by the time that I was already in middle school, early high school, like 8th and 9th grade. He did this only a few times, but I remember them very clearly because they were very impactful. He did this. He would pretty much give me about 10 cents of a dollar for every A that I had in each class. Give me about 10 cents for every A plus. Give me about 7 cents for every A, and about 5 cents for every 5 cents of a dollar. These are all the dollars.
I didn't get
Which
any
is a
money.
lot.
I didn't get any
Yeah,
money for my
you didn't get any
schooling.
money.
That's
You
part of.
didn't learn any this exact lesson.
I learned a different types of lessons, but
Yeah,
man.
you learned different types.
So pretty much every time I would get great grades, obviously, I would get rewarded. I wanted the highest possible amount of money, not because, oh, I can save the money and money is good, so I can buy something with it. I can reward myself, and I did a good job. It was more me knowing my dad's obsession with money. It's all about money. The way our whole growing up, our whole childhood was about my dad trying to figure out how to pay our school, because we studied in a private school, and it was all about the finances. It was all about the money. And so I grew up with this idea that love and acceptance and worth equals money. So for me to be loved, I have to do something that creates money that means I'm loved, right? And so in this case, getting those A's and A pluses was getting those, in this example, 70 cents of the dollar, because I know that meant a lot to my dad. Not because of the actual money, but because money meant to him a lot. And so money, by default, became something that gave me meaning, and so it became something that was important in my life. And so money became like the center of my life as well, because then that's the only thing that gives me worth. So I come to college and I'm realizing all these lessons, and I had COVID this year, and while I was in isolation, I made this realization that the reason why I haven't been successful the way I should be successful is because I've seen success being measured by simple metrics such as money. If I have money, I'm successful. Period. If I have status, money, I'm successful. And so everything that I did pretty much it was all about the money. My whole career, I mean, I started finance, accounting, economics. I was once a triple major. And it's all of them were about money. I mean, crazy, but it was all about money, about getting those big bucks, and I didn't know it back then, obviously.
Mm.
But then now that I've studied more, and I've realized, been more introspective, that I can, money is a tool, like everything. It's like it's a tool. You can use it for good and for bad.
And
Yeah,
so,
I think
yeah.
the lesson that I've had, and I'm having to grow out of, is basing my self-worth on performance.
Mm-hmm.
So if I perform well in a relationship, I feel good. If I
Yeah.
perform bad, I feel bad. Or
Mm-hmm.
if I perform well at work, I feel amazing. Or when I was younger, if I would, like if yes, so much of my self-worth was tied to my performance. But
Mm-hmm.
man, what happens when you have a losing streak, or you have a whole year of losing streaks, or you have 2 years of losing streaks, like that was my case, where your performance is garbage. And if your self-worth is tied to your performance, then you feel like garbage. And
Yep.
and somehow there's got to be room for your self-worth to not be tied to your performance. What if
Mm-hmm.
you are valuable just as you are, by being you?
Yeah.
You don't have to achieve anything to be valuable. You don't have to, or you're not exchanging love for performance or for what you bring to the table. What if
Mm-hmm.
you're loved just as you are? And yeah, I think that's I think that's one of the main things that I'm facing head on.
Yeah.
My self-worth not being tied to performance, and it's we grew up in the Christian world, in some versions of God that are preached, because in church there are hundreds of versions of God that are preached.
Yeah.
um, but you could have in the same church different versions of God preached in the same church, or you have
Mm-hmm.
Eastern Orthodox, or you have Pentecostal, or Baptist, or Calvinist, or Armenian. There's all these different versions of God. Um, but there's some versions of God that are preached that God's affection towards you is based on your performance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you are failing, if you're missing the mark, if you're not living up to a standard, God is not only angry at you, but he's wrathful towards you. He's angry at you to the point of wanting to choke you to death if you're missing the mark, if you're not meeting the standard, if you're not meeting. So if you're someone that already ties your value to performance, and it's being reinforced at church, at your church, or it's being reinforced, in your job, Josh, you see the world, it's all about performance. It's all about how you perform. Either you do it or you don't. There is no try. So there's got to be. What if there's another way of feeling valuable? What if you are enough as you are? What if you don't have to bring anything to the table to be celebrated and someone being happy to see you? I don't know.
I think that's so hard to comprehend because in our modern age, pretty much that's impossible. I think that's why the love of God it's above understanding, because it's just not human. Because humans, we tend to simplify things in order to understand them. So we've simplified God a lot in this way, and we compare God to our earthly father more than we should, for sure. And that's why, when I was in isolation, because I had to be in isolation for when I was sick, I had all this time to think. I mean, I finished all my homework, did all the things I had to do. Then I had so much time that I had to figure out, what am I going to do? So pretty much when you have no noise, turns out you start talking to yourself, and you start, maybe not physically talking to yourself, but your mind goes nuts, goes crazy, starts telling you things. It's like, wait, this is out of the blue. And I realized that, for example, in my trading, because money was used as a metric pretty much. And one of the lessons I learned was performance is also gives you your worth, right? Because you are, back in my example, I was given money, which means my dad loves me. My worth is given by the metric of money. But you're worth it because you actually did excellent in school. You got all A pluses. And so performance truly does matter, because then you're rewarded by your father's love. And so for the last 2 years I've traded, and I've been an options trader for 2 years. It's a kind of a very different animal than normal stocks, but I found that it's actually, they're more alike than not. And I realized that whenever I would my hit rate is probably 90 to 95%, which is extremely good. I'm able to predict 90 to 95% of the time, which is incredibly good. But what would happen is that 5 to 10% is all it really took to get my account all the way down. So for example, I would have a week, maybe 2 weeks of really good trading, and we're talking about thousands of dollars. I would be trading Amazon options. In the week I would be like $3,000, $5,000 up. Maybe in a day I would be up 3,500. Incredibly good. But then if I was wrong, that 5 to 10% of the time, which is not much, I would let it ride out all the way down. If I'm making a call, pretty much I'm predicting the market to go up, and I'm wrong, and the market just keeps going down, I'd be like, oh, I think it's gonna turn it back around. It's gotta. I mean, I've been right 9 out of 10 times. 19 out of 20 times. This can't be the one time I'm wrong. And you lower and lower and lower. By the end of the day, you realize you have $1,000 left in your account, and you're like, "Oh my word, I can't believe this!" And And you might still think at the end of the day, oh, I might just, in my case, I'd be like, I might as well just leave it for tomorrow and see if it rebounds. And the next day, it just continues to hemorrhage down. And so that was a huge problem that I realized. And in my case, that was it was the worst combination you could ever have, because I had learned that in this case, money is going down in my account. I'm not worth it. Pretty much is what I'm being told. I'm not performing well. Even if I have $3,000 left in my account, I'm not worth those $3,000. So I might as well just risk it all. I might just gamble it, because I'm not worth that success, the actual success of like doing well. And it's fine if you do well. It's fine if it's totally okay if you do well. But in my case, I shouldn't do well because I'm losing money, and I'm wrong, and I'm performing wrong. So I therefore should keep performing wrong, because I'm not worth performing well. I'm not worth doing well. I'm not worth being the best. And
Yeah,
so
it's a
Slippery
spiral.
slope.
It's
Yeah.
a spiral of negative.
Spiral downward.
It's funny because the way emotions are just emotions. They're feelings, but somehow we, depending on our story, we learn to translate the emotions one way versus another. So we have a negative emotion, you can say like, oh, it's good that I'm getting this negative emotion. It's time to get out. But if you associate that negative emotion with failure, and that failure says something about your
Who
self-worth.
you are. Yeah.
And then, wow, my self-worth is pretty low right now. That adds to the feeling, which makes you feel like a failure. So you start spiraling
Yeah,
down
self-sabotaging mechanism.
pretty darn quickly, because you associated the feeling of, the trade went wrong, the feeling of being wrong, of a mistake, with failure, with your self-worth being down the toilet, and it's just spiral. And then you look up, there goes my account.
Yeah.
And so I realized that was a huge problem when I was in isolation. And I wanted to get back into the markets because I love it. It's for some people it could be classified a hobby. For me, you could say it's a hobby, but then it's truly entertaining, because every day is different. Every day is very different than the day before. And no day is the same when you're trading. And it truly tests pretty much who you are. And so that's why it's been an incredible, and I think it's been a catalyst to my realization of who I have been and who I shouldn't be. And so I decided while I was in isolation that, I'm actually gonna act like I'm worth, just because I'm worth it, just because I'm created in God's image and likeness. And I said, before I go into a trade, I'm gonna decide this is gonna be my plan, and this is how much money I'm willing to risk. The moment it goes down below that, I'm immediately stopping out. If it continues up, then okay, cool. I'm just gonna leave it and let my wins run. And incredible, but just that change of, and having that discipline, because now I'm able to say, "Oh, Nain, don't worry about it. You're losing $100, $500. It's within your risk, because you're winning the battle in the end. Because it's even if, for example, the way I do it is 1 to 3 risk to reward. So I'm willing to risk 1/3 of whatever I'm risking, right, for the 3 times the amount, the reward. And so even if you're wrong, let's say 2 out of 3 times, which is unlikely for me with a hit rate that high, then I'm gonna be positive over time. And so I realized, it's gonna be fine if I lose this much money. My worth is not based on that. And so I started doing really well lately, and that's and I've applied this to a lot other things in life, and it's been incredible, incredible. So I have to thank you for that because you've gotten me on this journey of looking into myself and who I am and all the lessons that have created this Nain. And there's so much more that, so many more lessons that we could speak on. And yeah, so I know there's a lot of people that are dealing with that, seeing themselves as your success is based on your performance and how much money
Yeah.
you have or whatever metric.
Oh,
But
or I know in a lot of states, a lot of businesses have been shut down permanently. And if you're an entrepreneur and you risked your livelihood to open a business, and a lot of your livelihood is tied to the business. You expensed a lot
yeah,
of your life through the business, which is what a lot of small businesses do. Man, a lot of people are going through a lot of very, very tough time, and it's it's tough already to be facing a lot of uncertainty, and it's tough already when you have a family, you've got kids, or you're a young person and you have your whole future ahead of you, and you feel like this is gonna trip you up and you're not gonna ever get up. Um, I think you can get up, but quite often you need help, and the good kind of help. One of the ways good help uh, points you uh, towards your suffering, towards your own dragons that we all have that we have to go and face.
yeah,
Like Jordan Peterson would say, we all have there's a dragon in each of our lives, and he lives in a cave, and he's sitting on top of the gold. And if you ever want the gold in your life, you have to go and face that dragon and kill it, and you get the gold. But if you don't face the dragon and kill it, uh, that dragon is gonna come out of his cave and he's gonna burn your city to ashes. He's gonna burn your life to ashes. I think a lot of us have things that in our life we haven't dealt with, um, and we think we'll be fine. But heck, that dragon sooner or later is gonna come out of that cave and burn your whole life down. One of the things my therapist said, I think it was my second week, he said, "You are one of the youngest people ever to come into my office."
yeah. I
Because
remember you telling me this.
he says most of the people that come to him, and he's been a therapist for 40 years now, 30, 40 years, they're in their 50s or 60s. And they make it, they go to therapy in their 50s and 60s because their whole life is in shambles. They've lost their company, they've lost their wife, they've lost their kids. They have nothing. They're going through a horrible divorce. They're barely hanging on to their life. So, uh, so now looking back, I see my life a little bit with different eyes now. I can see that I'm fortunate because I've been forced to deal with things um, sooner than later. It definitely is not fun because SITT, or story informed trauma therapy, literally what we're doing is we are untangling my whole life from before I was born, year zero, all the way, all the way through my whole life. We're untangling everything. What lessons I've learned trauma, pain, things that were taken away from us. Like, for example, one thing that I found out was that to me, randomness equals pain.
Huh.
So I found out that whenever something comes out of nowhere, it's usually bad.
Interesting.
So when talking with Jackie, who she would say that she's an optimist. For her, she has this in her soul. She has this feeling something is good is going to happen. I don't know what. I don't know when, but something good's going to happen. But for me,
The opposite.
it's the opposite. I don't know when, but something bad's going to happen. Something random. If it's random, it's bad. And I attribute it to, hey, growing up, we were mugged. There was people dying, being shot in our front, in front of our house. Our house was broken into and we're completely looted or stolen like about 8 times. So, and all these things are random things that happen out of nowhere. But as you're growing up, you're learning. Wait, what are you learning? These things that you weren't expecting happened and they were bad. So you learn that all things that happen unexpectedly are bad. So your friends throw you a surprise birthday party. You feel you feel out of place. You're like, something bad is gonna happen. This is coming out of nowhere, so this is random. This is unexpected. It has to be bad. But wait, everyone's having a good time. So you don't know how to deal with things like that. So one way to deal with it, one way that if you have that in your heart, in your story, so you want to control your environment. Yes. I don't want random things to happen. I don't want unexpected things to happen. Everything needs to be consistent. Everything needs to be I want to be able to know what's going on at all time, because unexpected equals bad, and eliminate unexpected things. So you want to control your life.
Interesting.
And you think you can control everything. You think you can control relationships. You think you can control the weather or all these things.
I can imagine how that can be a problem with trading, especially. Because, oh my word, it can be incredibly random. You're forming this pattern, and all of a sudden you're thinking it's a bullish pattern. All of a sudden, instead of going up, you're immediately goes down, and you're like, what the, that wasn't supposed to happen. Yeah, like,
yeah, but you can rewire. You can rewire your brain. You can understand your story. You can redeem it. And one of the beauty of knowing and understanding it is that you can own it, and then you can rewrite your story. You can write the ending to your story. I was watching Saving Mr. Banks, which it's how Mary Poppins was made. It was with Tom Hanks. Oh my gosh. Pretty much the author of Mary Poppins had taken her relationship with her dad.
Yeah.
And she wrote the story in order to process what happened as she lost her dad when she was young. But something that in the movie Walt Disney helped him do by writing the ending differently of Mary Poppins was to redeem the memory of her father. And something we say, I learned a lot in story informed trauma therapy is, if you understand and own your story, you can write the ending. And you can write an ending that you like. And
say those 3 again. So
if you know,
understand,
and own your story. Own. You can write the ending. But if you don't know, understand, and own your story owns you. Your story
Yeah.
chooses for you. Your story, you're like, how the heck did I end up repeating the same pattern that my dad and granddad did? Why did I choose the same abusive relationship? Why am I here again? Why did I have this issue again with my new boss, even though it's a completely different place? You know, if things like that are happening in your life, that's because your story is choosing for you, and you're choosing these things subconsciously. So the more you know, understand, and own your story, the more you can notice patterns and you can adjust accordingly.
That's so true. Yeah, I remember when you told me that, and I was reading again. I wrote out one of the other lessons I learned was, and I called you about this because I sort of had like a flashback. A memory came back, and people don't know this. Fun fact. I don't know if it's very fun, but in this term, fun fact is I don't know much of my childhood. And my brain just blocked it for one reason or another. I'm still trying to figure out why, and I'm pretty sure why, and I can remember some couple things here and there that's happened that weren't supposed to happen. But I one of the memories that I had was there were shavings in the ground on the ground in the living room, and those were not supposed to be there. We're, my dad is also he likes things to be cleaned all the time, and yeah, maybe that's a bit of an obsession, but pretty much there were shavings on the ground, and we don't like the shavings on the ground. Obviously, they're like pencil shavings, right? Like after you sharpened with a pencil sharpener. And I was playing around, and then my mom just comes up to me and she's like, "Nain, would you leave the pencil shavings on the ground?" Like she just assumed it was me, and I'm like, "What? No, what pencil shavings on the ground? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about." She's like, "Yeah, why'd you do that? Why'd you leave the pencil shavings on the ground? Go clean them up." And I'm like, "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do that. I'm pretty sure that wasn't me. That was probably Obed, which is another brother." She's like, "No, go clean them up." And so I ended up cleaning them up. I ended up cleaning the pencil shavings, and knowing that it wasn't me. And so this is one of the lessons I learned is never lie, because if you do, you might never ever be trusted. And you don't like I learned that I don't like when I'm not believed. And this might not be the first memory that made this lesson, but it was one of the at least the first memory that came about this sort of related trauma. And so we come to the present, and this last semester, there's a lot of games with lying involved. A lot of games with lying involved. Secret Hitler. There's a bunch of like other games where you're pretty much lying about who you are. You're like you're in this team, you're in that team, and pretty much you're trying to capture the other team, and you're trying to discover who's in your team as well because no one else knows. And so pretty much you're lying about your identity because they give you cards. And I could never lie, and I never knew why. I was like, this is just what I do. So every time I would play that game, everyone knew if Nain says he's a good guy, we know he's a good guy. People don't have to doubt me. And so after I realized that that was a lesson that I had learned, sort of like that, what you said, I understood it. I knew it. I understood it. But now I had to own it because otherwise I was always going to be controlled by that. I was always going to be controlled by that fear of not being believed. And so in this game, one day I'm like, they're playing. I usually say no because I can't. Back then, I literally could not lie. You could ask me any question, and I'd prefer not to answer than to give you a lie. And I still don't like lying, right? But in this case, to add for this example as a game, and so I'm like, okay, sure. And I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna actually try and lie. And because it's pretty much harmless, it's a game. That's what I said to myself. And I decided to own that part of my story, and I intentionally lied about my identity in the game. I said I was a good guy and I was a bad guy. I'm not part of the blue team. I was part of the red team, but I acted like I was part of the blue team. And man, everything was fine. The world didn't crumble.
Yeah,
My whole people didn't think I was someone else. So that was that's an example I think of.
a good
And
victory.
yeah, it was a great victory for me because I was like, wow, this is incredible. I don't have to feel guilty about this, or I have control of my life, truly.
Yeah, you don't have to feel shame.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. This is I think the journey to wholeness is it's a long and painful journey. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but man, it's definitely worth it. I've already seen
Mm-hmm.
improvements in my relationships. First with Jackie, and then with the girls. Relationship with my brothers. I would
Mm-hmm.
say this year, all of our relationships, amongst the four of us, they're improving.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
like
by a very large margin.
yeah. So this year 2021, our relationship as brothers has been the best ever, and I think part of it has been because we're all realizing, dang, we all need to work on stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
also, dang, we all need to work on similar stuff. So we've become almost our best allies in
Mm-hmm.
our path to wholeness. Um, yeah, I mean, man, it's painful. It's not definitely not a walk in the park. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I remember.
see,
Yeah,
it's just,
I remember when I sort of started. You told me, you will know when you're ready, and your body will know when you're ready to take on more stuff about your story, and your body will reveal it to you some way or another. And I was like, okay, and I literally told myself one night, this is last semester, and this was a few weeks before finals, like literally like a month. And I sit down on my bed, and I tell myself, I'm ready, and I articulated it with my mouth, and I'm ready. Let's take this on. Let's take part of my story on, and oh my word, I started having dreams. I usually don't have dreams at all. I started having dreams. I was having a headache day and night, just would not stop. I wasn't dehydrated. I wasn't lack of food. Um, Having nightmares, similar feelings to when I was a child. Oh my word, the pain, and then just randomly feeling happy, randomly feeling just frustrated, angry for no reason, and all of a sudden things started coming out. And I think you have a good analogy for that about the pretty much the you're a truck and you're carrying this, what is it? You're carrying like a tree that you cut down. Can you explain that analogy?
oh yeah, that's Byron's analogy.
Yeah.
That actually actually happened in his life. So he had he was chainsawing in his property, and I don't remember the whole specifics, but for some reason he had to take off in his truck and he was driving down the highway, and everybody was looking at him funny. He was like, "What's going on? He did something. He's going." And then he realized he was dragging a massive branch, you know, behind him in his truck. And then, oh my gosh, he realized until he was way down the road, and and he tied it to his story. In our story, sometimes we're dragging massive branches in our life and we think we're fine, but people around us are like, "Hey, something's going on," but you're like, "Wait, what? I feel normal. I feel fine." So yeah, sometimes we're carrying massive things. We don't think we are, and we don't notice them because we've lived with those
No
things
idea.
our whole lives. Other people can be like, "Hey, you know, you've got something there," and that's what we get to surround ourselves with, healthy or reciprocal relationships. Being around people that care about us for who we are, that we know that they care about us, so that when they speak and they say, "Hey, you have a branch, I can help you with that if you want," that you would, if those people say things like that, you would trust them and listen to them and grow, because people that care about you want you to grow and want you to succeed and have a wholeness in your life, so
And I think, yeah, I've seen the church differently now because I value it differently. I've seen the church I now see it as a way of that carrying sort of, not simply just carrying the load of one another, but actually getting rid of it. You don't have to share it if you don't have to share it. You can just get rid of it. You can cut it. And so now I see the church like that. I see the church, wow, this is an opportunity to get to know other people and completely different stages of life, right? Because the church is, you could have someone 90 years old and
yeah
a baby that's newborn of 4 weeks. And so, yeah, so pretty much in that story too, with the tree, you have that branch, and he says you have to head back to your original spot. But as you're coming back to where you started, it's pretty much in his property, you have to come and get all those leaves, all those other little branches that you've left on the path, that you've left as trash, and in order to clean up your story and your road, and in order to deal properly with the tree or the branch, which is
yeah
an incredible analogy.
yeah
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's uh, such a great topic that has helped me incredibly, has helped you incredibly, and maybe it'll help someone else just hearing
yeah
some of
maybe
this. Maybe, yeah.
maybe it makes sense to them. We'll
Yeah.
see.
So, well, thank you, yeah, for your time and for being able to, yeah, just be on the show despite all the things that you have going on. I know you're extremely busy, so
Yeah,
But yeah,
well,
thank you for this.
yeah, thanks for having me.